Do you want to learn to play piano but don't know where to start? You love to play the instrument, but when you watch tutorials, you find yourself getting lost in all the terminology and jargon? Don't worry, this video is for you. As you can tell by the title, I'm going to be attempting to teach you the fundamentals to playing piano, like note names, intervals, scales, and later on in the series, a lot more. If you want to jump straight into it, there should be a time marker that you can jump ahead to. But before I get into the lesson, I'd like to start off with an introductory rant on my qualifications, the positives of self learning, and the negatives of self learning. So, firstly, I took one on one piano lessons once a week for about 3 years and have been playing piano for about 6 years. I'm by no means a professional, but I am certainly beyond an amateur player and have experience with both traditional lessons and self teaching. So, a fair warning before starting this series: self teaching requires stricter discipline and more willpower. With traditional lessons, you have a schedule and obligations to meet. You have to go to the lesson on a particular day at a particular time, and you have to perform a particular piece or practice a particular concept. And learning online doesn't have those same restrictions, which can be great if you want to learn at your own pace. But the flip side of that is that it makes it incredibly easy to give up on or even entirely forget about. Now, the reason I say that is to make it clear that nobody can make you good at piano but yourself through proper and consistent practice. But if you are seriously dedicated, you can learn to play piano without ever taking a single one-on-one lesson. Although if you do have the financial means to do so, I would seriously recommend doing it. Now, if you look at a piano, you'll notice that there are a lot of keys, maybe even too many keys. How are you supposed to make sense of 88 different keys? But if you look closely, you'll likely notice a repeating pattern of black keys that go up the keyboard. 2 notes, then 3 notes, then 2 notes, then 3 notes, then 2 notes, then 3 notes, and so on and so forth. Now, if you hit 2 notes that are in the same place in this pattern of black keys, say this note, you'll notice that they sound very similar. This is because they are the exact same note in what is called an octave apart. You see, the piano and all instruments only have 12 notes, and each key only has 7 of those notes within it, which is much easier to keep track of. Before anything else, you need to learn these note names. Now let's start with the 7 white keys, or natural notes. Starting from the bottom of the keyboard, or right above the middle note in the group of 3 black keys, is called A. From there, it's as simple as walking up the keys and the alphabet at the same time. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then we get to the end of the pattern, which is the same note that we started on. A. Now we can repeat that pattern all the way up and down the keyboard. Now that you know the names of each natural note, you can name the black notes as well. The way we do this is to take the natural note name that is above it and flatten it, or the natural note that is below it and sharpen it. For example, this could be C sharp, or it could be D flat. This could be D sharp, or it could be E flat. Now, which of these you choose actually does matter slightly in a semantic way. Without getting too heady, basically every single key has to have one of each note. So if we're in the key of G sharp major, we have to have one of each note name. So this would be a G, or G sharp. This would be an A, and this would be a B sharp, because this is a C sharp, and you can't have a C and a C sharp in the same key. But again, this is stuff that will get more important later. This is all kind of semantic to you right now. All you need to know for now is that you can call every black note by 2 names, and those names are determined by the 2 natural notes situated next to it. Now, if you're struggling to remember the note names, please, for the love of God, don't buy those sticker packs off Amazon. You know the ones. Get an expo marker and write the names on top of each key. It's not only a cheaper solution, but it makes you actively pay attention to the note name while you're writing them. And before you say that it'll rub off, just write it on the top of the key right here where you don't play. And if you're getting your hand up in here somehow, I don't know what to tell you. Now that we know the note names, we can move on to intervals, which are just a fancy way to describe a relationship between two notes. Just like the note names, there are 12 basic intervals that fit within the octave, and 7 of them fit within the major scale perfectly, or diatonically, which means all of the notes in the interval fall within the major scale itself. Don't worry, that'll make sense in a minute when we go over what major scales are, but you have to know what an interval is in order to build a major scale. So there are 2 intervals that you really need in order to build a major scale, and the first of which is this, otherwise known as a semitone. A semitone is any 2 notes that are directly next to each other. It's also called a half step or a minor second. The next important interval to know in order to build a major scale would be the whole tone, or the whole step, or major second. A major second is any 2 notes with only 1 note in between it. The next in the series is called a minor third, which has 2 notes in between it, as you may have guessed. After the minor third, we have the major third. After that, we have the perfect fourth. After that, we have a tritone. And then after that, we have a perfect fifth, which is a very important interval, and there's a lot you can do with fifths, but we'll get onto that kind of stuff later on. After the fifth, you may have guessed that there is the minor sixth, then the major sixth, then the minor seventh, then the major seventh, then the only note left to go is the one we started on. This is called an octave. This C is being played 1 octave above this C. You'll notice that each major interval is named after the number of notes through the key you are. For example, in C major, a major third is the root with the third in the scale, with the root being the first note in the scale, and the third being the third note in the scale, because C major is this. And for intervals that don't fall into a major scale, you can just give it a minor name of the interval that's above it. But how do I know which notes are right for each scale, much less how far through it I am, I hear you asking? Well, now that we know what note names and intervals are, I can finally explain to you what a scale is and how to construct one. Now, there are actually 7 different types of scales or modes, but today we're going to be focusing on the most common, the major or Ionian scale. A scale is a series of notes played in a specific order. We'll be starting with the C major scale, and as I showed a second ago, the notes of the C major scale are just all of the white notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Notice the pattern of whole and half steps when you go up the C major scale. The distance between C and D is a whole step. The distance between D and E is a whole step. The distance between E and F is a half step. The distance between F and G is a whole step. G and A is a whole step. A and B is a whole step. B and C is a half step. Now, if you put those all in order, you get whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And you can use this pattern from any starting position to make a major scale. Now, like I said, we can take that same pattern and start on any note and create a major scale from it. So let's start on G. So using that pattern, we get whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And that sounds very similar to the C major scale because it's also a major scale. It's just rooted in a different position. And you can start on any note. So if you started on F, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Now that we've covered the basics of scales, let's talk about keys. The key of a song refers to the scale that the song is based on. It's pretty simple, and a lot of people use these terms interchangeably. Now, I would recommend practicing scales for every major key, Or if you really can't be bothered doing something as boring as playing basic scales, find a song that you like that hits most or all of the notes in a scale, and try and play it in every key that you can. I did this with the Wii Sports theme. And it unironically helped me a lot to learn most of my major scales very quickly. And the good news is, if you learn all of your 12 major scales, you actually know all 12 of your minor scales as well. Because using the exact same notes as any major scale, you can just go to the sixth note and start there, and then you have a minor scale. So for example, if we use the key of C major and count up to the sixth note, you get A. And if you start on A and use all of the same notes as C major, you have an A minor scale. The only difference is where the scale is rooted. Before we go, let's wrap up and revisit what we have learned. There is a repeating pattern of 12 notes that goes up and down the keyboard. For simplicity's sake, we only name those 12, and then repeat the naming up and down the keyboard as well. The 7 white notes are called the natural notes and are given basic letter names A through G. The 5 black notes are given sharp or flat names relative to the natural notes situated next to them, depending on the key. Remember, a key has to have one of each note, and only one. You can't have a C and a C sharp in any key. There are 12 different intervals within each octave, which you can name using how far through the scale you are. And to name intervals that don't fit within the major scale, you just give them a minor name of the degree above it. There's a unique pattern of intervals that you can climb starting at any note to make a major scale. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And every major scale contains a minor scale within it, starting 6 notes up. Now, as much as I'd like to cram everything you need to know into one video, I just don't think that it's possible. But I do plan on continuing this series, so before I go, here are some things that you can do to practice in the meantime. Find random notes on the keyboard and challenge yourself to name them as quickly as possible. You can find any 2 random notes on the keyboard and play them at the same time, and try and identify the interval that you're playing. You can also practice constructing scales. Using the pattern that you learned here, you can make a total of 12 different major scales. Pick one or maybe a few scales to learn, and play through every note of the scale like this. Do that until you can memorize the scale and know every single note. If that's too boring for you, maybe pick a song that you like and try and learn it in a couple of different keys. Don't pick anything too complicated, and if you have to, you can simplify it. And the last thing that you can do to make you instantly better at piano is subscribe to this channel. I promise that is true. Please subscribe to this channel. I am hungry. My kids are starving. I really don't know. Anyway, that's going to have to do it for now. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to practice.